there's been just so much research out there that showed like men and boys that subscribe more to this traditional masculinity, this very narrow view of what a man should be, have like poorer mental health outcomes, more violent, suicide, and all these things. And so it seems that that's so proven, and we just trying to want to ignore it, And I was going to say, I wonder if the function, the institution of high school, how it is, at least in North America, is making that problem worse. I'd love to see like a performing arts high school and ask all the boys and men in there and see if it's the same idea. Because if you walk into any high school, at least Ontario, you're from BC, like sports was kind of the thing. And in the States, I'm sure it's 10 times worse, where like the people valued are the popular kids, the kids that are doing sports, the kids that are on varsity, and all these things. And so this kind of supports the idea of that the ideal traditional boy or men are these guys. Whereas if you're in a school that maybe has a strong reputation for performing arts, then even your more creative boys, and even gay boys, gay teenagers, they have that sense of belonging, so that they don't have that fear of judgment. Do you have any insight on that? Or because I've just thought of it now hearing it, that I wonder if is high school just really the worst?
It's not the worst for everyone, but I would say
Yeah.
that yeah, there's a lot of truth in that. It's a difficult minefield for almost every teenager. I do have insight into that because one of the schools I researched that took part in my research was exactly the type of school you described. And the
Cool.
interesting thing is that, yeah, it was less restrictive in some traditional ways, but there was other types of hierarchy within that school in terms of like which musicians were the more like I don't want to give too many details away about the school that was in my research, but
Okay.
there was still a hierarchy within just a different framework. And I would, from the outside, it seemed less restrictive than other high schools. They talked about how, or the boys that I interviewed from that school talked about how they do notice a palpable difference when they attend or visit another nearby, and they feel like they got to put on a bit more macho physical presence, which they didn't have to do
Huh.
at their artsy school. But
Right.
it's like one of the things. It's like I've talked to another school where they're having an issue with kind of very misogynistic teen boys, and it's from the ultimate frisbee team, which you think like the ultimate frisbee team, like that's not the football club. And it's like the same thing. Like I grew
Right.
up as an athlete. Volleyball was my main sport, but sometimes like I was really respected for being an athlete in that sport. But also sometimes I heard comments like, "Well, that's the gayest out of all the sports too." And so there's always hierarchies, and those switch and they're context dependent.
Right. Well, I think we're always between men, unfortunately, and some women will keep this going as well. But mostly between men, you're always like, who's the more manly? Who's doing something that's gay? Is that a pink shirt? Like we become like gender enforcers from like age 5, and we do it in like ways I don't think we even notice. But it's always a way for all men around us to kind of have to prove themselves.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. But it's really
Oh,
cool that you studied schools that were different to get that sort of idea.
yeah. In general, there's more similarities amongst teenage boys. Like the thing is, like my advisors, when I had to get my research approved, they're like, if you're interviewing, I had 170 grade 12 boys, and I ranked them, gave them surveys that exist and some other ones to determine their level of emotional expression. And then I
Hmm.
interviewed groups from the most emotionally and the least, and they're like, if you're going on these extremes, like you might be concerned, or are you concerned about them being so different that like you're not really getting a good sense of the average teenage boy? And the thing that's really remarkable is how similar these extremes were. It's like we're not talking about so different creatures. The fact is, like all of the teenage boys in my research, they all felt the pressure and the need to restrict themselves, especially during the transition to high school and the first years of high school. And then
Right.
some of them were able to be resilient to that and resist it ultimately. And some of them willingly adhered to those pressures, and some of them reluctantly adhered to those pressures.